Good morning, everyone. We are glad to have you here. We're going to give folks a minute to join, and then we'll go ahead and get started. If you have any questions or tech issues, feel free to add them to the chat, and our tech guru, Haley Fenner, will help you troubleshoot those. Good morning again to everyone joining us. We'll get started in just a moment here. All right, well, looks like most of us have joined. Well, good morning and welcome everyone to our April 2022 edition of our member-only Curator Conversation. As always, my name is Elizabeth Darling. I am the manager of membership and annual giving here at the VMHC. And we're so glad to welcome you to this month's program. As always, this is a member-only program. Thank you so much for your continued support through this time when we've been partially closed, partially open, and now closed for a little bit longer. I'm sure that all of you have been receiving lots of things via your email and mail from us about our reopening. I'll review again at the end of the program, but if you haven't already, please do register for our member preview day on May 11th. You can do that online or by giving us a call. And today I am so pleased to bring you a special edition of our Curator Conversation program, where we are going to talk to a VMHC employee who is not a curator, but who does a very cool job here at the VMHC. And we'll get to meet him, and he'll talk a lot more about this new position at the museum and what this is going to do for us and for our larger community. So as always, if you have questions or comments throughout the program, you can add those to the Q&A feature or to the chat. We will have a time for questions at the end of the program, and I know that Joseph and I welcome those. And we'll go ahead and get started. So today we are going to meet our new Manager of Partnerships and Community Engagement, Joseph Rogers. And he comes to us, I think, since December, so not too long, but has been doing a lot with us, and he's going to tell us a lot more about himself and what he's got planned for the museum. So welcome, Joseph. We're glad you're here this morning and glad you're here at the museum. So we are just going to kick things right off with a basic question. What interested you in history, and how did you get involved in museums?
Yeah, thank you so much, Elizabeth, and thank you everybody who's joining us today. We really appreciate, one, your support, your membership, and then two, your willingness to be here early on a Monday morning. So as we're all taking sips of our coffee and listening about my background here and the plans that we have for the museum, I just wanted to emphasize that. But that first question is, of course, a great one. And the answer that I always have for it, as far as how I got into museums, is I came by it honestly. That is to say, my family has been involved in history work since before I was born. My mother, Gina Rogers, I love her very much. She's wonderful. If you've ever been to the Maggie Walker National Historic Site, she is the supervisory ranger there. But before she was there, she was in a couple of other places, and she started out her Park Service career in the Blue Ridge Parkway and then at Booker T. Washington National Historic Monument, where she brought me along as a very small child. The picture that is upcoming here is my mother and then me at the age of, I think that was either 3 or 4 at the time. And she's bringing me along at the cutting edge of living history interpretation. At the time, she's put these little holes in this burlap sack, popped it over the head, and we're running around, having me run around the site going, "I'm baby Booker." So you know, she dragged me through history when we moved to Independence National Historic Park, and then to Valley Forge as well. So there's a slightly older me standing next to Liberty Bell, along with a couple other Rangers kids. Yes, we all did stand underneath the Liberty Bell after that picture. And between just us, I will say that if you're ever wondering, the Liberty Bell tastes weird because that's what little kids do. And I got into a lot of trouble for that. But I now know what the Liberty Bell tastes like. So there's now they have a lot of things and restrictions for that. But there's also us over here at some of the reconstructed huts at Valley Forge National Historic Site. And you can see over here, my mother is now also bringing my sister into it, who we're wondering what she's going to do after she's finished her graduation, her studies at VCU, where she is right now. But the age difference between us, we're still both getting taken to work with mom. So, you know, being steeped in history from a generational standpoint was very important and in shaping my understanding of it, because it wasn't just a matter of, all right, cool, I'm having these casual interactions with history. In many ways, I was very much involved in placing myself in the story and the historical narratives. And that became extraordinarily important in my later years, because I took a break from history. I didn't major in it when I went to school, for as brief as that was. And I actually did not pursue it that much, but it did inform some of the things I did when I was in the Navy as an intelligence specialist for the United States Naval Reserve and the Office of Naval Intelligence. I was always looking back at the history of other cultures that we were examining as well. So when I left the military and when I moved back down to Virginia, it was interesting in that I was able to then get involved with other museums and institutions and groups that were really interested in history, because Virginia is, of course, itself steeped in history. So I started out in the museum world. My first official non-public, non-profit museum job was with the American Civil War Museum. And I started there as a costumed interpreter, doing first person and third person living history programs, such as the Overheard program there at the White House of the Confederacy. And then I eventually moved into front desk staff, frontline staff, doing those same, doing tours of the actual White House of the Confederacy, of the Tredegar Ironworks grounds, et cetera. But by 2019, I was promoted to the manager of education there. So education programs manager started out as a one-person job where I oversaw all of the school kids that came in, but I was able to expand it by the end of my tenure, at the end of last year, until we had a team. So we went through we had an entire team of incredible people that I brought on. Here is all of us at Appomattox, and I will say that that's probably one of my greatest and longest lasting contributions to the ACWM, and one I'm most proud of is being able to bring on an incredibly collaborative team to help increase and expand the education programs at the ACWM, because many times in the Civil War story, people who look like me were not really talked that much about. And again, my experience in history was always about being able to see yourself in it. And so if I was able to bring that to students across the Commonwealth by expanding our programming options, revamping all of our narratives, bringing in that more inclusive history to include the stories of African Americans, to include the stories of women, to include the stories of immigrants. We completely overhauled the entire system, and now they are running on all cylinders and doing a great job. So.
I love the fact that little baby Joseph was steeped in history, and then you tried to go away from it, and then nope, brought you right back.
I try to get out and they keep on bringing me back in. Right?
Well, it's a lifelong love, and you've certainly done a lot leading up to being at the museum at the VMHC. So you were very much a great addition to our team, and your position here, the manager of partnerships and community engagement, it is a new position that we created last year. So can you talk about what does this position do here at the museum, and why was this position created?
Yeah, absolutely. So, of course, I wasn't on staff when the position itself was created, but I've asked that question. One of the things that I like to do when I get on board with anywhere is just to find out more about the culture and the history of the place that I'm now working. And so I asked around what people thought my job was, right? Which is a great way to find out what your job actually is what people expect of you. And so there was a lot of different answers. There's definitely a part of the staff who recognize like one of the places where we were weakest perhaps was in that we didn't necessarily engage with our surrounding communities as much, where there was not as much trust between the communities in which we lived and purported to serve and the actual institution itself. And of course, one position isn't going to fix that, but it can definitely help, right? It is about the actual taking what we do and what we are doing and presenting it to people, because a lot of what the problems have been now that we've done a lot of course correcting, we've turned the ship. It is about just getting the word out and getting more people involved with the process so that we can continue to work collaboratively. My job is wonderful in that it's the very first of that the museum has ever done. And so I have the liberty and freedom to really craft it and create it to what I believe it should be. And my job is also terrifying because it's the very first that's ever happened, and I get to craft it and create it as what I think it should be. So it's like a high stakes, high risk, high reward situation in many ways. But what I get to do really is just emphasize what we have done with the new leadership and people who have dedicated so much time to it. You see so many people who have already started building up these partnerships with other institutions, with community partners, with community groups, independently. And that is essential to the ongoing and good relationships of the museum. But they also were then housed and homed in so many different places that it became difficult to track who we were partnered with, who we were engaging with, who we were actually involved with. And so one of the things that I have been doing is just looping it all together, getting people to communicate and managing those and overseeing those relationships.
Yes, we have a lot going on here at the museum. We've got, I think, just under 100 staff members. So, yep, we can all be doing things, and they're all good things. But it's hard sometimes to remember what everyone is doing. So it's great. It's great with your position that you're able to be the font of knowledge of we are doing all of these great things, and I know all of the things we're doing, so that I can tell people about them. So. You mentioned the work that has been done and the work that's ongoing. So obviously your position, it involves partnerships, it involves community engagement. In your mind, what would you say is a good community partnership? What is it? What does a good community partner look like?
Yeah, that's also a fantastic question too. I like this image. I think really says a lot about what I think a good community partner does. I should back up to one of the things in which I personally engage in my volunteer time is a community organizer. So I've been working with the Virginia Defenders for Freedom, Justice, and Equality since 2017. And part of what we do there is that we really go out and we talk to people about what their concerns are. We report on the things through the Virginia Defender newspaper. And what that really emphasizes is an understanding of a concept of mutual aid. Mutual aid itself, and this is not going to be a full explanation of it because that would take an entire other conversation, but mutual aid is at its core an understanding that charity, that it's not charity, but in fact, mutually assured construction, right? And that we succeed because others succeed, and we fail. And when we fail together. And when one part's fail, they fail together. So I look at this image of the Arthur Ashe Boulevard dedication, right? So, and you can see so many different things. One, it was a huge event. It was a fantastic crowd. I hope that some of you were able to attend it. I think I actually see my stepdad right here in that image, right up front, holding up the camera. But it was such a big moment. And it really kind of engage with this idea that the museum itself wants to be and should be Richmond's front porch. And I don't know about y'all's front porches, but mine, I sit out on my front porch and I watch all the kids come by as they go down to Lux Field, and they wave and I wave back, and I start to get to know people's names, and we get to engage with our neighbors that way. And that's what we should be doing as the front porch of Richmond, right? Because we want people to feel comfortable, welcome coming into the building, walking by the building, engaging with our community and our actual exhibitions. And so you can see here over on this side, on the right-hand side, the Alegba Folklore Society performing this incredible event. And one of the archetypical Richmond institutions with regards to the Black community here. And then, of course, on the national and statewide stage, you have Virginia Senators Tim Kaine and Mark Warner, but then also U.S. Rep. John Lewis. I mean, it just speaks for itself how this is a way of engaging with the community in such a way that we see it right in our faces, and we can only really succeed as long as Richmond succeeds and as long as the state and the Commonwealth of Virginia succeed. So we are invested in our neighbors, in our state, and in the continued existence of everything in between. So that is ultimately what I see a good community partner being, is that institution that actually continues to engage constantly.
Yes, I love our new thought is Richmond's front porch, and really not just Richmond. I mean, it's Virginia as well. Even though we are located in Richmond, we have members all over the state, and we tell the story of the full state and all Virginians. So even if it takes you a little while to come to your front porch, we're so glad to be moving and living into this new chapter in our story as a museum. So you've talked about good community partnerships. You've referenced the Arthur Ashe Boulevard Dedication Day. That was a that was a one day of many where we've partnered with our community, and obviously you're going to work to have more partnerships for us. So can you talk about what you're working on currently, and can you walk us through how the VMHC is already active in community partnerships? You've mentioned the Arthur Ashe Dedication Day, but we've got some other things going on as well.
Oh, absolutely. I'm gonna drop a very quick plug here for Richmond Navy Week, which is coming up the week after our grand reopening on the 14th of May. Our specific day with our event is going to be on the 17th of May. So this whole front yard space that you see here will also be engaged with the Department of the Navy as they bring in resources for this omnibus event. So please stay tuned for those for that information. It might seem like it'll get lost in the shuffle with everything else going on, but I promise we want to keep that promotion going too. But we're taking inspiration from the things that we have already been doing, right? So when we look at our partnership with the Black History Museum and Cultural Center of Virginia, the literal exhibition Partners in History, where we looked at this kind of archetypical partnership that we have, the prototype that is setting the standard for what we can do as a partnering institution. It not only allows for us to hold and help digitize some of the archives of the Black History Museum and Cultural Center, but then put on display and use our own exhibition space as an area for shared exhibits, for shared storytelling, for shared narrative telling. This is one example of it, and we've got more to come. Even when it comes to traveling institutions and exhibitions, traveling exhibitions from institutions such as the Smithsonian. There is one coming up, the American Democracy Exhibition, which we're providing from our own collection several of the artifacts that will be on display there. So even though it's a traveling exhibition going all across the country, there will be a specific Virginia Museum of History and Culture flavor to it. And so we see our partnerships expanding in that way as well. When we look at other institutions, the one from which I formerly came, right, the American Civil War Museum, we have a partnership with them in transcribing and digitizing the papers of the Confederate Memorial Literary Society. So there are a number of different ways in which we're partnering with similar cultural institutions to expand our access, their access, and independent access to these incredible artifacts, objects, and documents. Then there are community partnerships that exist outside of that typical museum, cultural center space, such as what we have put up here, our Cristo Rey Richmond High School partnership. Phenomenal program. Cristo Rey has a work study program for its students in which we get to partake as a corporate partner to hire and employ these students. We don't pay them directly. In fact, the payments that we do make go to Cristo Rey, and then Cristo Rey actually uses those payments to subsidize the students' educational experience. So their work does pay for them to continue on through school, but they also pick up a lot of invaluable skills, training, work study abilities that they can put on resumes after the fact, that they can really learn what they want to do. And I think that that's almost an understated, an undervalued thing when it comes to high schoolers. When I was in high school, the push was go to college, go to college, go to college. That's where you're going to find out what you want to do for the rest of your life, right? But then you sometimes go to college and you find out that's not what you want to do for the rest of your life. And with the rising cost of tuition going way, way up there, much more than even when I was in school, it's important now more than ever for students to be well informed and have the opportunity to engage with different aspects of potential work life afterwards, so that when they are in school, they're making decisions based off of what they want to do in life or what they want to experience. And so this gives the chance to really shape students in a different way. And, every single one of the kids that you see here are so phenomenal. I'm lucky we are lucky to be able to work with them. I'm lucky to have some great meetings with them, one of which is coming up tomorrow. So I'm excited about that too.
Yeah, I think the Cristo Rey is a really cool. I guess they existed when you and I were in high school, but I certainly didn't know about them. And there's definitely a lot to be said for, going to college and you can get the expertise, but there's really nothing like actually doing the job and figuring out, do I like it? Do I not like it? There's so much practical experience that you can get through this program that you can't quite get in the classroom. So it does my little history geek heart proud to see high schoolers in here thinking museums are cool.
Yes, absolutely.
um, so obviously we're doing lots. We could certainly do more. So with our collection, since this is it's a special edition, but it's still a curator conversation. So we want to give our members some nods to what's in our collection. So Joseph, for you, in your mind, is there any particular objects or artifacts in our collection that you think represent as a good representation of a community partnership?
Yeah, and I think, in fact, that I kind of want to flip the conversation a little bit. As I mentioned before, I am a former museum educator, still consider myself a museum educator. Let's be real. Once you're there, you don't really come out of it that easily. But so when I look through the objects that we have, it's not as though there's a single object that represents partnerships and community engagement to me. But in fact, one of the incredible exhibitions that is upcoming, curated by the magnanimous Brittany Hutchinson, is called Finding the Familiar. And so here is a sneak peek of a new exhibition that will be debuting on during the grand reopening. So I will say, of course, that some things are subject to change. They're not necessarily going to be exactly as you see them here. However, what we do see is this attempt with Finding the Familiar, the opportunity to create a space where people who are engaging with the museum itself to find something that they can connect with on a fundamental level, like on a simple, straightforward level. And so the space itself is crafted in such a way, and it's not a very large space, it's modest sized, but it is crafted in such a way that you feel welcome, right? This seating area where you can sit down and talk with each other, or just look around, and especially if you've been walking around a 6,000 square foot exhibition space for a while, sitting down is very nice. Not unlike a couch you might find in your own home. Right over here, you'll also see a newspaper there. You'll see several other artifacts in it. The Finding the Familiar is all about looking at museums through a different lens, looking at your home through a different lens. Because I used to do a program for students in which we did artifact investigation, where we asked an essential question: what is an artifact? And the answer was relatively simple, straightforward, right? An artifact is any object that is created by humans for humans to use. And so when we ask them, are you wearing an artifact right now? Is your watch an artifact? Is your ring an artifact? Are your shoes an artifact? Well, the answer is yes, right? Even your shoes are artifacts. At some point and someday, those things will become so important to someone who we don't know at this moment. And they might even become important in your lifetime. You don't know. It might just be that, this particular set of shoes, I think this is a size 17 shoe that was worn by a basketball player. Like, these are the kinds of things that people don't necessarily think about being their own artifacts and their own contributions to history. But when you do think of them in that way, you realize how much of a story they can tell about your own life and about the life that the world that you're living in that moment. So even when those artifacts are things like, baseball bats that you may have used when you were a kid, or your father's Navy cap, which my cap is somewhere now, and I honestly can't even remember where it is. Oh, no, I know exactly where it is. But those kinds of things could easily become artifacts someday. It's just a matter of how you see it and how you can connect with it, because I think it's absolutely cool that we have Patrick Henry's glasses, the ones that he has so many pictures of himself, putting them right on the top of his head, and then like as he's about to give those impassioned speeches. But sometimes there's a disconnect between seeing that kind of object and going, wow, that was so long ago, even though it really wasn't. But being able to see objects that, yeah, you could have picked up and held yourself, that you probably may even have at home. Those are the kinds of things that can really connect people through to museums in a different way. And it kicks off our collection process, because it allows then for communities that may not have seen themselves in history to want to engage with both us and other cultural institutions in sharing that history, so that we can continue the story of Virginia.
Yeah, I love how this exhibition is set up. It's a bit like you're sitting in your living room. I imagine I sit in my living room, and then I just imagine the things I have on my counter, just in glass cases, protectively conserved. Like my little cat, porcelain cat, has been curated. It has an accession number. Turn over there. My art that I made when I was 5 is also, now a priceless museum artifact. So yeah, I think this exhibition really speaks to what you were saying, Joseph, of you never know what's going to be important. And a lot of the time we won't know until, our descendants 4 generations from now find it in the attic and say, oh, this is, Grandma Elizabeth's bonnet or whatever. Then, all of a sudden it makes it into a collection. So
Absolutely.
And again, like Joseph said, this exhibition will open with our grand reopening. And just another plug, if you haven't registered yet, members get to see everything first on the 11th before the general public on the 14th. So be sure to register for that. So we've talked about what we've been doing, and I'll also throw out, for those who were on the program in February, we already did a deep dive into our Commonwealth, but just to mention as well, Joseph mentioned several great partnerships. We also have that statewide partnership with several organizations and cultural centers and museums throughout the Commonwealth to create our new exhibition, Our Commonwealth. That is a sister exhibition to the story of Virginia, that will also open or reopen on May 11th for members. So just a nod to that as well for what we've got going on. So Joseph, the last question to wrap us up here, it's real simple. You probably won't have anything to talk about, but where do you want the VMHC to be in a year, in 5 years? In the future, in regards to community partnerships?
Well, that's a great question. Great question. Very simple. No complexities to that whatsoever. Well, first of all, I'm going to put us on this slide, which brings us to what we expect the museum to look like from the parking lot, and not a year from now, but only, what is that now? 4 weeks? Now we're at 4 weeks, aren't we? So in 4 weeks, we expect to have all of this green space in the back. We have all this connected material. So just in 4 weeks, we expect to reopen the museum, as you mentioned, on the 11th, to have open for members, which will be fantastic. But then really, where do we go from there? And again, it's a very large question. But the biggest things that we want to do is we want to engage in our partnerships more fully and completely. And how do we mean by that? For one thing, we want to utilize our internship program more effectively. One of the things that I'm spearheading is to bring in more interns from around the state, from different institutions, and to continue to work with the institutions that we have. Naturally, we have a phenomenal relationship with Virginia Commonwealth University and their internships or their interns. We have a great relationship with the University of Richmond. We want to expand those to our other neighbors with Virginia Union University, Virginia State University. We really want to get out there, even with UVA out in Charlottesville too. We really want to make sure that anywhere people are engaging with history in the Commonwealth, that they can feel they can take on internships, whether during the semester or during the summers, with our institution. So we really want to expand that, and through that, we believe that we'll really and truly be able to get more richly involved with our communities. Additionally, we want to make sure that we are reaching those, the entirety of the Commonwealth, right? So in many respects, when we think about the Virginia Museum of History and Culture, we do think about Richmond, right? We think about Central Virginia. And so that has been the kind of skew towards it. People have often considered it to be one of Richmond's history museums, right? But it really, we want and desire to be the State History Museum of Virginia. And we can't do that without repping the places that are all around the state, right? So this picture behind me is of my hometown, my birthplace of Roanoke, Virginia. And so we want to make sure that we are representing Roanoke, Virginia, representing Tidewater, representing Northern Virginia, but then everything in between as well. And I cannot emphasize that enough. As someone who was born in Roanoke, I understand very well the stigma that Virginia ends at Roanoke and Blacksburg, right? That it just stops after that point. And that's something that we know is not true. Southwest Virginia is full and rich with a lot of different cultural institutions, various people who have their own stories to tell. Southside Virginia is also incredibly filled with historical stories and cultural influences that cross state lines, right? And that bleed over between North Carolina and Virginia. And these spaces within the Appalachian Mountain Range, the Appomattox region, where if you remember that picture, the picture that I had of me at the ACWM was actually at Appomattox. So I'm used to making those drives. And so going out and being present in places like Middle Peninsula, the Northern Neck, the Eastern Shore are equally as important as being in Charlottesville, Roanoke, Alexandria, Virginia Beach, Newport News, Hampton, and Richmond. So expanding those kind of partnerships, being present in those areas and in those places, and encouraging people to share with us their own stories will be incredibly important. Alongside those, we have made an additional commitment to really stay involved and connected with the Native tribes of Virginia. I don't know if anyone his folks have been paying attention to it, but the Rappahannock tribe has recently received a huge amount of the land that was previously held as part of their territory back and in their conservancy. And telling that story and promoting that story is something that we want to be able to do as well, and do so in partnership with them, not to tell the story for them, but to give them our platform for them to tell their own stories and spaces. In these kinds of spaces. And I, again, could go on and on and on about everything else, but I know that we want to get to questions from the group too. So I'm going to keep the rest in reserve and let us move forward with that. With one other drop is that maybe in the next 5 years, if the partnership that I'm working on this week goes well, we might be doing a little bit more oral history you might be hearing a little bit more oral history out of the Virginia Museum of History and Culture as well. So that's the last hint I'm going to give for some things to come.
Well, yes. So a very simple answer to a very simple question. Well, yes, thank you, Joseph, so much for explaining your role and where you've come from and how you've gotten here. We're so glad to have you here. I can attest that Joseph brings a lot of energy, positivity, and just a lot of forward thinking to the museum. So it's very exciting to have you here with us. So we do have some time here for questions from our members. You can enter them in the chat or in the Q&A feature. So I'll give folks a couple of minutes to enter those. And so Joseph, to kick us off for just fun questions, you obviously are a museum lover. Walk us through your perfect museum experience as a visitor, as a guest. What's your perfect day at a museum?
Wow. Okay. Let's see. My perfect day at a museum, I think, would have to start out with being able to actually eat something, right? So shout out to our new museum cafe, which will have its own outside seating right out of here. But as someone who is coming from the Treasurer Ironworks, which is its own like small food desert within the rest of the city of Richmond, having a food option is incredible. So I'm very happy that we're going to have that. But after I have filled my belly and prepared my brain for knowledge, early mornings, the first thing I really want to do is engage with text. Now that's an odd thing, I think, for people to probably hear, but I love reading in museums. I am the kind of person who stops at every panel, who reads every highway marker. I've gotten into a little bit of trouble with my wife because I'm like, oh, I don't know what this one says. And I like have to slow down or pull over at least to get like a snapshot of it, or at least to get the title number of it so I can roll back and do it later on. It's like, all right, I'm going to search this actual thing. So I love reading the stories that museums tell, that exhibitions tell, and how the objects anchor those stories. So a really good balance between objects and storytelling is what entices me the most. I love interactives because I love seeing how kids engage with them, and as well as adults, right? So having the opportunity to make decisions in a museum exhibition is also incredibly exciting. So being able to say, oh, okay, cool, I can choose the path that I go on here and learn what I want to learn about is a pretty great opportunity. And so having that chance is equally as fun. And then I'll say finally, well, two things. One, a place to sit after doing all of that walking. And then two, a place where I can share my feedback, where I can actually engage in ways that other people will be able to see what I've left, the mark that I've left on that, and what my thoughts are. I don't always do it because sometimes I sit there and I synthesize for too long. But I do think that having that opportunity allows for me as a museum goer to reflect on what I just experienced and what I saw. So that those thoughtful kind of question asking opportunities are really important to me as well.
That sounds like a pretty good day at a museum. I'd be down for that. And you did mention, Joseph, that we do have a new museum cafe that will open with our reopening. Again, member preview on May 11th. I'm going to sound like a broken record for the next 4 weeks until then. And members, as well as in our museum store, do get a discount in our museum cafe. So be sure to check that out. I know I am certainly looking forward to having coffee available in the mornings, just downstairs. All right, well, to wrap us up, I do want to honor everyone's time. Joseph, thank you so much for speaking with us today. I know that I've learned a lot, certainly, and hopefully our members have as well. As I close us out, I do want to remind everyone that we've got some upcoming events. Again, as always, you can go to our website, virginiahistory.org/events for a full listing. Our next curator conversation will be in June, on June 27th, and we will have our curatorial team will be back on Zoom. They are incredibly busy this week, next week, and all days until we reopen, putting together all of our new exhibitions. So they'll be back in June. We have our Christian lecture where James Horn from Jamestown, Historic Jamestown, will speak about his newest book. That will be on April 20th. Tickets are still available for that. Again, we have our member preview on May 11th, our grand reopening May 14th and 15th. And then we have our in-person member Mondays at Historic Virginia House on the first and third Mondays of this month, May and June. So the next event will be on April 18th. That's a week from today. So tickets are still available for that. Just as a final note, as always, thank you so much, members, for your support. We have so appreciated your sticking with us during this time, and we are so excited to celebrate our hard work and your continued support next month, as Joseph said, just in 4 short weeks. And Joseph, you'll be there at the member preview day, so people can meet you in person, and you'll be around the building. You mentioned Navy Week, the grand reopening weekend, so there'll be plenty of opportunities for us to get to meet you in person, not just virtually. With that, we'll wrap up. Thanks so much to our tech guru, Haley Fenner. She's been silent, but a very important partner as always for these programs. And we so look forward to seeing you at the next event. Have a great day. Bye.